You have heard the phrase old soul. Someone who feels too deep, too aware, too sensitive for a world that moves too fast. But the ancient Gnostics offered a far more mysterious reason for this feeling. They said some souls have lived through many cycles, walking through realms of illusion, memory, and shadow long before they ever reached Earth. These souls arrive carrying a quiet echo of where they have been, a soft ache that whispers that something here is incomplete, and that remembrance is heavy. It sharpens pain, deepens love, and reveals truth long before others can see it. Why do old souls suffer the most? And what does that suffering reveal about their purpose? Take this teaching as symbol or medicine. Keep only what resonates in your heart and trust the part of you that recognizes what is real. One important note before we continue. These teachings come from a mystical tradition, not from science or official doctrine. They're poetic descriptions of the soul, designed to point toward inner truth through symbol and image, not to coerce belief. Treat them like mirrors or maps, useful for seeing angles of yourself you might miss, but never the final authority. If a metaphor lands and brings clarity, hold it close. If it feels confusing, heavy, or disconnected from your life, set it gently aside without guilt. I've personally kept a few of these ideas as companions during uncertain times, and I've discarded others after they didn't fit my experience. That's okay. The work here is experimental and personal. You are responsible for your own well-being and your path. That means honoring medical advice, personal safety, and your ethical sense above any poetic teaching. Use these images to explore, not to bind, to question, not to obey. Let curiosity guide you, and let compassion for yourself decide what stays. Practically, this might look like trying a breathing practice that feels calming and noticing whether it helps you show up differently, or reading a metaphor that suddenly makes a painful memory feel less sharp, then keeping that image as a small tool to return to. If something stirs anxiety or discomfort that doesn't resolve, pause and check in with someone you trust or a professional. You're the steward of your inner life. Curate it with gentleness, humor, and patience. These teachings are invitations. Accept or decline them with your own wisdom. If it doesn't help, release it, and be gentle with yourself, okay. To the ancient Gnostics, an old soul wasn't a taste for antiques or a love of philosophy. They believed it was a soul that carried memories from many lifetimes, across worlds crafted by the Demiurge and beyond. These souls carry echoes of past awakenings and the ache of earlier struggles. They feel the weight of this constructed world because they remember the light that exists outside it. They spot illusion faster, sense falseness sooner. It's not clairvoyance as much as stubborn familiarity. Their pain doesn't signal weakness but memory, a quiet knowing that this setting is incomplete and small in comparison to the whole. That background makes them lonelier sometimes. They ache because they remember kindness, clarity, or a sense of freedom that doesn't fit here. Because they've tasted something purer, they can become fierce allies to seekers, guiding with patience and the kind of tough love that remembers what it's aiming for. If you've ever felt out of step, haunted by déjà vu, or an acute sense that something important is missing, that's the kind of memory the Gnostics were describing. But their suffering isn't meant to trap you in guilt. It's an invitation to remember your larger origins and to be gentle with yourself as you wake. Old souls in the Gnostic view are not bragging rights. They're witnesses, teachers, and sometimes the ones who carry the pain of warning others. If that resonates, treat your memories like maps. Study them, rest when they get heavy, and share what you've learned without forcing it on people who aren't ready. In their quiet way, old souls help pull others toward remembering the bigger reality, and that's a gift worth honoring. So be gentle with yourself. Remembering is a process. You don't need to fix everything at once. Curiosity and kindness will guide the way back to that wider light. Be patient. Be kind. There's a simple but painful truth the Gnostics pointed to. The more a soul remembers where it came from, the harder it is to stay comfortable in a world built on forgetting. If you've ever felt ordinary life hollow, or watched people's behavior and thought, "How can they not feel this?" You've brushed that memory. It isn't a badge of honor. It's a weight that sits behind your ribs. Old souls aren't isolated because they can't connect. They're isolated because connection often looks different to them. Where others play small games of status, distraction, or defensiveness, an old soul sees the backstage. That clarity makes easy interactions feel thin. You might find yourself leaving parties early, baffled by gossip, or exhausted after conversations that circle the surface. That tiredness isn't social awkwardness. It's a soul being pressed between remembered depth and present shallow routines. Compassion arrives faster for these people because they remember lifetimes where compassion was natural. So when someone snaps at you in traffic or lashes out online, your first response isn't only annoyance, it's recognition of a recurring pain. That empathy becomes a constant intake of other people's hurt and beauty, something most of us have learned to filter out. Living with that open channel means feeling more, which also means hurting more. Being misunderstood adds another bruise. You speak through the language of the heart, metaphors, quiet truths, a look that says more than words, and the world answers with noise. People label you too sensitive or aloof because they don't hear what your silence is saying. The suffering here isn't punishment, it's friction, ancient memory grinding against present illusion. And though it's painful, that friction can refine you into someone clearer and kinder if you learn to hold the remembering with gentleness instead of resistance. For many old souls, sensitivity isn't just being emotional. It's a kind of spiritual porosity. You walk into a room and you know, before a word is spoken, that something hangs in the air. You can tell when someone is pretending to be fine, feel a city's fatigue, or notice the subtle shift after an argument. That internal radar makes you unusually attuned to nuance. Gnostic teachers frame this as the outcome of refinement across lifetimes. The soul, having returned again and again, learned to notice subtler realities. Where many people skim surfaces, an old soul reads currents, motives behind a smile, history held in a building, the quiet grief after a celebration. This heightened perception brings depth, empathy, and a kind of wisdom that sees meaning in what others call trivial. But that gift can be a burden in the lower worlds, the messy, noisy places filled with dense emotions and chaotic thought forms. Those environments are like heavy weather for someone who is porous. Other people's anxiety, unprocessed rage, or casual cruelty don't stay external. You take them in. A passing stranger's impatience can linger in your nervous system. A viral story can sit in your chest for days. What most people shrug off lands as truth inside you. That reality is exhausting and isolating. You may apologize for being sensitive or mask it so you don't rock the boat. You might feel responsible for fixing the room's mood simply because you noticed it. Learning to live with this sensitivity means practicing boundaries, saying no, stepping out to breathe, grounding rituals that remind you what is yours and what isn't. Simple tools help. A brief body scan, visualizing a protective color, cleansing your space, or repeating, "This is not mine." Your sensitivity is not a flaw. It's a source of deep compassion and insight. The work is learning to honor what you feel while deciding what to carry and what to let go, so your light can keep working without being extinguished by every passing storm. Imagine the world as a carefully constructed set, not awful by accident, but built that way on purpose. In Gnostic terms, the Demiurge is the lesser architect who assembles the material world as a place of limits, rules, hierarchies, distractions, and small consolation prizes. Most people move through the set without noticing the seams. They learn the lines, play their parts, and forget there was ever a stage beyond the curtain. Old souls don't forget so easily. Maybe you felt this, a persistent sense that something about modern life is slightly off. You find the canned optimism in advertisements hollow, the treadmill of career and status numbing, small injustices gnawing at you until you can't look away. Where others shrug and adapt, you keep asking why. That's not just skepticism, it's memory. Deep inside, old souls carry the echo of a different home, what Gnostics call the fullness, a realm of real light and harmony. That memory doesn't fit into a world designed for limitation. So you feel like an exile, awkward at parties, impatient with bureaucracy, restless in relationships that lack depth. You sense the artificial seams of society because your inner life remembers a coherence that this place routinely violates. That awareness brings both pain and purpose. The pain is the longing, sudden, inexplicable waves of nostalgia for something you never physically experienced. The purpose is the map you carry, not a literal chart, but an internal compass pointing toward honesty, beauty, and justice. Old souls spot hypocrisy because their root nature recognizes harmony. When they see imbalance, it hurts them in a way that can't be medicated by distraction. Being an old soul in the Demiurge's world is like carrying light where most people carry routine. It isolates you sometimes, but it also makes you a subtle resistance, someone who remembers another order, and by remembering, keeps the possibility of return alive. That tension between exile and map shapes choices, relationships, and the quiet kind of rebellion that changes lives. That's why some of us seem to meet the hard stuff right out of the gate. In many mystical traditions, including Gnostic streams, there's an idea that souls who are already carrying a deeper mission or awareness aren't spared difficulty. They're steered into it. Hardship isn't a cosmic punishment. It's a kind of spiritual boot camp designed to wake something up inside. Think about a person who's always felt different, more aware, or painfully sensitive to injustice. Maybe you were the kid who noticed when others were hurting, long before you understood why. Or you've learned lessons early that others take decades to face. Betrayal, loss, loneliness. Those moments feel unfair, but in the Gnostic view, they act like a flare shot into the fog of ordinary life. Pain becomes a signal. Pay attention. Remember who you are beyond the roles you were handed. Isolation, especially, is often misunderstood. When you find yourself alone at an early age, it's easy to interpret that as rejection. But that solitude can become focused training. Without constant external noise and validation, your inner senses get a chance to sharpen. You begin to hear the quiet voice of intuition, to see patterns in people and systems that others miss. Loss does something similar. It forces you to reconfigure what you thought was secure, to let go of old scripts so you can develop a truer way of being. These are practical changes, not just poetic lines. Early hardship nudges you toward greater compassion because you've personally known how it feels to be hurting. It trains your inner sight because you learn to look beneath appearances. And it refines intuition because survival depends on perceiving things others ignore, instead of being controlled by the illusions around you. Status, habitual reactions, social approval, you begin to move through them with a steadier center. If this resonates, don't judge your past as simply cruel. See it as preparation. The wounds and the quiet nights were teachers asking you to cultivate an inner knowing. That doesn't mean hardship is desirable for everybody, or that suffering is the only path. But for many old souls, early lessons are the forge that tempers the qualities a deeper life requires: clarity, empathy, and the courage to walk through illusion without losing yourself. And this is where the loneliness shows up. Not the empty, helpless kind, but the quiet ache of seeing more than most. Maybe you've sat in a crowded cafe and felt like an observer in someone else's life. You notice the tremor in a friend's voice before they admit something, the tiredness behind a coworker's joke, or the way a stranger's eyes tell a different story than their smile. That experience can make you feel invisible, even when you're surrounded by people. There's a reason for that. When you're tuned to layers others don't easily see, conversations can feel thin. While people trade small talk, you're tracking timelines, motives, unspoken needs. You sense the patterns that repeat across relationships, the subtle tiredness of a culture that moves too fast. Gnostics called this kind of isolation a mark of an old soul, someone whose inner memory holds echoes from many lifetimes, a soul that's walked through more realms and brings back wisdom the rest of us haven't reached yet. But here's the important shift, that loneliness isn't a defect. It's a sign of depth. Think of it like standing on a high cliff, where you can see the coastline stretching far beyond what someone at sea level can. From that height, landscapes look different, more connected, more worn by time. It can feel heavy, yes, but it also gives you insight that can be used gently. Your sensitivity becomes a kind of radar for truth and compassion. You don't have to carry it alone. Start by naming what you see. Journaling, sketching, or voice notes can be a private place to pour out the textures that don't fit into everyday chat. Seek out one or two people who value depth, someone who can listen without fixing, who won't rush you back into mirth when you're speaking honestly. Nature helps too. Long walks remove the pressure to perform and give you room to process. Most importantly, reframe the narrative. Instead of thinking, "I'm too much," try, "I've seen more." That small linguistic change turns isolation into gift. Your awareness is rare and necessary. It teaches patience, empathy, and a kind of steady courage that the world quietly needs. You may notice it in small moments, a tug in your chest when someone mentions a place you've never been, or the weird comfort you feel in old books and quiet corners. That persistent sense that your mind is older than your body, not just wistful, but fundamentally mismatched, is one of the clearest signs people call old soul. It's like your inner clock runs on a different era. There's often a longing too, a muted ache for something you can't name. It isn't necessarily romantic or spiritual in a tidy way. It's an emptiness that wants depth, meaning, a landscape of experience beyond what's on the surface. You might find yourself drawn to stories, music, or objects that feel familiar for reasons you can't explain. Many old souls report an early awareness of death. Not morbid fascination, but a quiet recognition that life is fragile and finite. Children who ask unusual questions about why things end, or who feel profound sorrow at small losses, sometimes carry this sensitivity into adulthood. That awareness shapes how you live, more intentional, less dazzled by triviality. Silence, nature, and stillness can become sanctuaries. Parties drain you, but an empty forest, a quiet room, or an afternoon watching light change calms something ancient inside you. You crave pause, not just to escape noise, but to listen, to yourself and the world. Shallow conversations feel uncomfortable. Small talk often lands like sandpaper. You want depth, not surface. You'd rather have one meaningful hour with someone than a dozen distracted interactions. When others can't match that depth, you may feel isolated or misunderstood. Sometimes there's a recurring sense you've lived before, not literal proof, but the feeling of having walked similar paths in different guises. Familiarity with places, people, or crafts that you've never encountered in this life can be disorienting and oddly consoling. People often notice a maturity in you that you didn't earn formally. Friends or strangers call you old wise or beyond your years, and you shrug because you don't always know how to explain where that steadiness comes from. None of these signs prove reincarnation or metaphysical pedigree, but together they sketch an inner memory. Gnostic traditions describe this as the dust of ancient worlds clinging to a soul that has walked many roads, an imprint of experience that shows up as longing, depth, and quiet knowing. If these patterns resonate, you're not alone. They're a language many old souls use to describe the shape of their inner lives. When you've carried pain for years, it's easy to feel like suffering is a mistake, a wrong turn. Gnostic thought flips that script. For old souls, suffering is not purposeless damage, it's a refining fire. Think of that fire as a teacher that strips away comforts, illusions, and quick fixes so the deeper self can stand clear. That doesn't romanticize pain. It simply recognizes that wounds can open rooms inside you where compassion grows. The quiet ache makes you less interested in small talk and more able to listen. Loneliness tightens your filters. You learn who and what truly matters. Sensitivity, once a burden, becomes a radar for subtle truths. All of this turns into practical gifts. Patience with someone's breakdown, an honest word that stops denial, a calm presence when fear storms through a room. Old souls often become healers, guides, or quiet centers of clarity, not because they chose suffering, but because their struggle prepared them. The wisdom you earned isn't abstract doctrine, it's weather-tested insight. People don't wake up from lectures. They wake up when someone who has walked through the dark offers a steady hand and says, "I know." In a world shaped by illusion, your experience is seed and soil at once. Your suffering is the dark earth where remembrance roots. When you care for your own wounds, you create a living map others can follow out of confusion. That's purpose, not a grand title, but a steady usefulness. The kind of presence that helps others remember who they are. If your path has been hard, that difficulty may be the very thing that equips you to help the world wake up. Maybe you recognize this. You've sat up late thinking you were broken, only to find later that your scars let you guide friends through their own dark nights. Or you've chosen solitude because crowds felt shallow, and in that solitude you learned to hear subtle truths others miss. Those moments are quiet proof that the inner work of suffering has been converting pain into purpose, preparing you to be a living lamp for others. Begin with stillness. Even 5 minutes of quiet before your day pulls you outward lets you touch the inner light that noise can't reach. Take these small returns daily. A cup held slowly, a breath noticed, a pause between tasks. Practice honest reflection. Journal a short note about what drains you and what feeds you. Watch for repeating patterns and name them without blame. When something consistently pulls your energy away, adjust your routine with gentle boundaries, saying no, shortening appointments, or limiting topics of conversation, not from fear, but from respect for your clarity. Seek out people who speak from the heart. One true listener can change the way you feel in a week. Spend time in nature where the veil thins. Sit by water, walk among trees, watch clouds, so your senses can settle. Treat sensitivity as a compass. Follow its indications toward truth, meaning, and places that feel alive. These practices don't erase your depth, they steady it, helping you move through a loud world with more ease and steadier steps. Try tiny rituals, a 2-minute breathing check-in, a 1-line log at day's end, or a folded note reminding you of truth. Protect mornings and late evenings as sacred windows. Let curiosity, not judgment, explore why certain people or places tug at you. Over time, these acts build resilience, not armor, but a softer steadiness that honors who you are. Let the light you return to each day guide small choices, and see how peace becomes your default response. Close your eyes and let your breathing slow. Easy in, easy out. Picture yourself standing in a quiet space of golden light, gentle and warm, like late afternoon sun on your skin. Behind you, faintly lit, are the paths of your many lives, some bright and clear, some misted at the edges, stretching farther than your mind can fully hold. Ahead of you is the life you live now, every lesson, every small joy, every ache, steady and real. Place your hand over your chest, feel its rise and fall. In that contact, Whisper inwardly, "I remember what I am." Say it as if you're returning a long-forgotten key to its lock. Notice the softening, how the weight on your heart loosens, how a tiny space opens where tension used to live. Imagine the light behind you meeting the light ahead. They do not collide, they blend, like two rivers finding a wider stream. The wisdom of what's come before folds gently into the immediacy of today. You don't need to analyze or prove anything, just let the meeting be. If memories or images come, watch them without forcing meaning. If nothing comes, that's okay. The knowing is happening beneath words. This is not a retreat from responsibility or pain. It's a quiet reminder of the ancient strength inside you, the resilient thread that has carried you through storms before. Let that feeling steady you for whatever's next. A conversation, a decision, a simple walk. Stay here as long as you need. When you're ready, take a deep breath, feel your hand on your chest one more time, and carry the phrase with you. I remember what I am. You are not new to this journey. You simply forgot for a while. Each time you return to this practice, the remembering becomes easier. Maybe you've felt out of step, carrying a quiet ache no one else seems to notice. That ache isn't proof you're broken. It's proof you're awake in a world that sleeps. Your suffering is the sign you carry something ancient and luminous. You feel deeply because you were meant to. You see truth because you remember. If this settles in your chest, hold it gently. You are not here to be defeated by the world. You are here to walk through it with awareness, with compassion, with a quiet strength that keeps showing up. Let this suffering be not the end, but the beginning of your remembrance. If this spoke to you, I'm glad you're here. Share what resonated. Your voice might help someone else feel less alone. And if you want more Gnostic teachings, you can subscribe. Your light matters, truly.